that was Horn of Puente, obviously dedicated to the great Latin percussionist Tito Puente and vibraphonist Tito Puente. And that's the first Latin tune that I'm posting from this Gordon Goodwin Big Phat Band series. Something I use a lot in my teaching, and it's probably a book you should have if you want to learn how to play with a big band. So this tune has two different grooves. It uses a groove called the cha-cha or cha-cha-cha, which is a Cuban dance groove. It's kind of a slower Latin tune, a Latin groove. And it also uses a groove called Sango, which is a faster kind of funk Cuban rhythm, which I'll be talking about both these rhythms right now. So cha-cha-cha is a rhythm that's normally played with a three-man percussion section. So in other words, normally there's not drum set unless you're playing a modern kind of jazz thing. So traditionally, it was done with timbales, congas, and bongos. And the timbale player would play on a small cowbell. It's called the cha-cha bell. It's the smallest bell in the timbale setup. And that just plays quarter notes. So in other words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sure most of you know what quarter notes are. All right? Now, cha-cha can be written in cut time or 4/4. So it just depends on how things are written. The tempo of cha-cha is normally about here. This is a very fast cha-cha, probably one of the fastest I've ever played, which is about. Normally that's not a danceable tempo for cha-cha, but that's the way the tune is, so that's what we'll be doing. So the right hand can play what's known as a wiro pattern. Now the wiro is a gourd that you scrape, and that sounds like this. We're trying to mimic that. Or you can do that with an open hi-hat. So that, along with my cross-rim click, sounds like this. Okay, so those are two options for you. Now the bass drum plays part of the tumbao pattern, which is what the bass player is going to be playing, and that's this: 1, 2, F3, 4, 1, 2, F3, 4, 1, 2, F3, 4, 1, 2, F3, 4. Okay, and it could do variations in there, and it's also useful in this groove for catching figures. Very useful. So altogether, that sounds like this. Okay, you can add some bass drum spice in there if you want. You can also play it on the bell of the cymbal. So that would sound like this. And oh, by the way, if you're doing that, you could play the wiro pattern with a splash technique on your hi-hat, which sounds like this. So okay, so that's another option. Or if you're just playing without percussion, you can play on a cha-cha bell, a small cowbell, like I said before. Now let's take a minute to talk about the cymbals that I'm using, because this is very important. When you think about Latin music, you think about one word, and that's dry. Latin music is very dry. There's not a lot of ringing cymbals. The timbale player might have a cymbal or two that they play to accentuate punches and kicks, but generally you want dry cymbals. So for this, I've changed my cymbals from the previous lessons, and I'm using a very thin Paiste Traditional crash on my right. Speaks very fast, and a 17-inch Paiste Traditional crash, very thin, on my left. It's a little bit lower in pitch. And then my ride cymbal is kind of a rare one. It's an old Jack DeJohnette Sabian prototype. I've had it forever, and it's very, very dry. It's not useful for much, but It's super dry. It's got a great bell. I like it for Latin music because it's so dry and it's not really annoying. It's not real high pitch. It doesn't ring much. The cymbal itself sounds like this. So extremely dry. I put some rivets in there because it was just too dry for me. And you know, you could do that if you want with any cymbal, obviously. And then to my right, I still have the Chinese cymbal that I love to use for everything pretty much. So that sounds like this. Now you should use some small hi-hats for this stuff that are very fast. I have a set of 13-inch Sabian HH here. I have several sets of hi-hats. This is just what I have handy here. So they're very fast. So I like 13s a lot for this kind of music. They're very quick and they disappear. And disappear is the word that you want to remember. So when you hit your cymbals, you're not wiping out the horn section. The crash just dissipates very quickly, and that's really important. So cymbal choice is very important for this kind of music. All right? So let's talk about the chart. Now, starts with the cha-cha feel and with percussion. You can't get rid of that. That's on the record already. I wish we could, but it's a little bit annoying. It's got shakers, maracas, and some other stuff. Normally, you'll find yourself just playing this music without other percussionists. So the way I approach this chart today is just playing it as if there weren't a lot of percussionists, maybe one. On this recording, there's three. It's probably, he probably overdubbed it on the actual studio recording. So the first section is cha-cha, and the figures you have to play when you're playing cha-cha, they're hard to catch. So the reason for this is because you're sort of relegated to this 4 pattern on the snare drum. So you got to catch figures within that, and with your bass drum and the cymbals and the hi-hat. So catching pretend figures might sound like this. So those figures are prominent throughout this first section, all kinds of syncopations. So you're going to have to work on that a lot. That's a little bit of a coordination issue, and you can work on that by just playing this ostinato and then getting some rhythms and then doing those with your foot. So. All right, as complicated as you can get it, so you can catch anything like that. But again, don't lose that left hand. It needs to be there. Once it's gone, we lose our groove, all right? Unless you're playing with other percussionists who are already playing that, then you're free to play some more snare drum and whatnot. So this goes along here really nicely until we get to 84, which is a double time Sango feel. Now, right when we hit 84, we hit that crash, and the piano player plays what's known as a montuno, which is a repeating pattern that's syncopated. So, all right? So this sets up our double time feel, which in this case is the Sango that we talked about earlier. So let's play a few different Sango variations for you. Just like the cha-cha, what a Sango is a relentless quarter note pulse. So normally a Latin groove like a mambo would have the cascara. That's what my right hand's doing, busier. A Sango's much simpler than that. So the right hand's just doing this. So you see just quarter notes. Now you could do a couple of variations. One would be this. There's several of these in my book, many of them. and plenty of other books too. So I would definitely listen to Los Van Van, Chanquito, and I would definitely check out books for this rhythm. All right. The other option is you could play clave with your left foot and play the Songo on the bell. That sounds like this. Okay? So you get the idea. It's funky. So that starts at 84, and it goes till the rest of the tune. It never goes back to the cha-cha. Also, at 99, you have this reoccurring figure that starts, which is, well, I'm sorry, 100, that starts, ba, 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 da, 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 and then little percussion breaks within that. The chart's written a little funny here. It doesn't necessarily describe exactly what's happening. So be careful. I wrote a few things on my chart, and I do that for my students too. The correct thing that's written, I don't know if they changed it in the studio or what, but it's a little bit different than written. Also, be careful on your fills here, because there's percussion on the recording playing fills, and you don't want to fight with that. You don't want to interfere. So I keep my fills pretty simple here. All right? Now, you need to do these figures like this. Short, 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 right? So when you see those marcato accents, and then the third note is long. So short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short, short. So you could phrase that like this. Okay? Or catch it. So remember, we've been talking about our short and long sounds. This is the perfect place to use that. And it happens so much, you're going to want to do different variations of it. I did as many as I could think of on the recording so you could see different ways to play that figure. I did that on purpose. And then in between these figures you fill, and then you go back to time. So very difficult section here. And then at 118, I do something a little different where I'm playing a drop bass drum on 2 and 4. So again, another montuno with the piano, and the horns are interspersed here with some figures. So the piano's going. So what I do is this. Okay, that's 118 through 124 if you want to roll back. That drop bass drum really keeps things together. It's something I use quite often. And you could also play nothing through there with the bass drum, or you could play the Sango pattern, which doesn't necessarily work as well there. But that drop bass drum, if you want to do it, go ahead and give it a shot. And then we're off to 127, which is the trumpet solo. Make sure you hit those first 3 hits pretty hard. Ba, ba, ba. That announces the arrival of the section. Now, the solo gets a little funny here. The trumpet section with the percussion on the recording gets a little wiggly at around, you know, the 135 or so, somewhere in there. Be careful. It just gets out of the pocket. So you just got to keep going and try to ignore it there, all right? And then they get back on a couple bars later. This solo has 2 choruses. The second chorus, we're introducing these backgrounds. Again, with the Songo, they're hard to catch. So you're going to have to work on a lot of independence to catch those. And again, I tried to demonstrate as many different ways to catch these figures on the recording. And then at 152, we're back to that figure, ba 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 da 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 da, and then the horns are playing in that on bar. Got to see here, 153 and 154. That's another spot you can use your drop bass drum to keep them together. Okay. And then we're off to our out chorus, our ensemble section here, which is pretty exciting. And then at 172, you have a trumpet break. Now, you can play Sango through here. I'd recommend doing it because the percussion's all playing through here, and it's pretty big. It's the biggest, like the climax of the piece. So you could do some fills and play a little bit more recklessly through here. And then the last 2 bars of the piece, 179, again, is that montuno. And the timbali player is playing a stock timbali fill there, which is, And then I'm just mimicking that. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2. Da, 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 da. Okay, so I would copy that there, not try to do anything else because it gets messy. So that's pretty much it with this Latin tune. I'll be posting a few others and then hopefully some funk and rock big band stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks.